Hollywood's golden age was a world of bright lights, carefully crafted images, and movie stars who seemed larger than life. But behind the polished smiles and studio-controlled publicity, many of those icons lived secret lives filled with hidden desires, private struggles, and scandals that never made the headlines. These were the stories Hollywood didn't want you to know, from heartthrobs who concealed their true identities to America's sweethearts battling addictions in silence. The reality was often very different from the screen image. Today, we uncover 10 Golden Age actors who had double lives. Rock Hudson was Hollywood's living embodiment of the mid-century ideal, tall, handsome, charismatic, with a smile that lit up the screen. In films like Magnificent Obsession, 1954, and All That Heaven Allows, 1955, he was the perfect romantic hero, the man every studio dreamed of molding. Audiences fell in love with his masculine presence, while studios capitalized on every move he made. But behind that flawless exterior lay a life of compartmentalization, fear, and secrecy, a life Hudson safeguarded for decades. Born Roy Harold Scherer Jr. on November 17, 1925, in Winnetka, Illinois, Hudson came from modest beginnings. His path into Hollywood began when agent Henry Wilson discovered him in the late 1940s and rebranded him as Rock Hudson, a name meant to evoke strength and allure. Wilson didn't just rename him, he began constructing the persona, coaching him in posture, voice, grooming, public manners, and relationships. As biographers note, Hudson was groomed into a masculine archetype that matched what America expected of a leading man. Under this careful image, Hudson signed with Universal and began to land supporting roles. Over time, he rose to stardom. Magnificent Obsession propelled him into the A-list, and Giant, 1956, earned him wide acclaim, including an Oscar nomination. On screen, he was virile, desirable, reliable, exactly the kind of man women adored and men envied. Yet the Hollywood that adored him also demanded a certain performance of masculinity off-screen. In an era when being openly gay was career suicide, Hudson's sexuality had to remain hidden. Rumors followed him, and studios worked aggressively to suppress them. When Confidential magazine threatened to expose him in 1955, his agent Henry Wilson deflected by revealing scandals about other clients. Shortly after, Hudson married Phyllis Gates in what many historians argue was a studio-orchestrated move to deflect scandal. Montgomery Clift was not the radiant idol of Hollywood's golden era who lived always in the glamour of red carpet lights. Behind that handsome, brooding face lay a man wrestling with physical pain, emotional fragility, and a life he could never fully show the world. In public, he starred as delicate lovers and haunted romantic figures. In private, he bore scars that went far deeper than skin. Edward Montgomery Clift was born October 17, 1920, in Omaha, Nebraska. From early on, he exhibited a creative temperament and sensitivity. He made his Broadway debut as a teenager and steadily earned acclaim on stage before Hollywood beckoned. By the late 1940s, he had turned down studio contracts, choosing to preserve agency in his own career, a move rare for the era. He only agreed to sign a studio deal after his first 2 films succeeded. That decision would foreshadow a tension between art and industry that followed him his entire life. His public image, delicate, introspective, emotionally charged, found resonance in films such as Red River, 1948, A Place in the Sun, 1951, and From Here to Eternity, 1953. Critics and audiences were drawn to a new kind of masculinity, Clift's vulnerability, his quiet intensity, his willingness to show suffering. He became one of Hollywood's original method actors, alongside Brando and Dean, often telling directors he refused to be boxed into conventional romantic roles. But the actor's public success masked a private life in flux. In 1956, Clift's life changed profoundly. Leaving a dinner party at Elizabeth Taylor's house, he fell asleep at the wheel and crashed into a telephone pole. The collision left him with severe facial fractures, a broken jaw and nerve damage, injuries that required extensive plastic surgery and forever altered his appearance. Though clever surgical repair restored much of his looks, the subtle asymmetry and lingering pain became part of his daily existence. Over time, his facial nerve was partially paralyzed on one side, and the left side of his face never fully matched the right. What began as physical healing soon opened a doorway to other wounds. Clift turned to prescription painkillers and alcohol to dull the constant ache and psychological stress. Insiders later described the years that followed as the longest suicide in Hollywood history, as his dependency grew steadily deeper, affecting everything around him. His once razor-sharp focus dimmed, memory lapses, mood swings, erratic behavior began to shadow his performances. On film sets, crew would discreetly warn one another when Clift's state was precarious.
Cary Grant. Cary Grant was the very portrait of Hollywood elegance, debonair, charming, always in control. Audiences adored him in films like Bringing Up Baby, 1938, His Girl Friday, 1940, North by Northwest, 1959, and Indiscreet, 1958. He played suave bachelors, witty lovers, pragmatic heroes, roles built around an image of polished masculinity and romantic ease. Yet beneath that impeccable facade lurked long-standing whispers of a different truth, one that Hollywood and the public rarely acknowledged, that Cary Grant may have shared a deep, intimate bond with fellow actor Randolph Scott, a bond more than mere friendship. Born Archibald Leach in Bristol, England, Grant arrived in Hollywood in the early 1930s, reinventing himself as the elegant leading man. He had many public romances and married 5 times, but it has long been speculated, by biographers, historians, and Hollywood insiders, that those public relationships masked something more complex. Among the most persistent rumors is his association with Randolph Scott. The two first met on the Paramount lot around 1932, and soon thereafter their lives became intertwined. According to studio records and publicity materials, Grant and Scott shared a house in Santa Monica during the 1930s, and their beach house life became fodder for fan magazines. Bachelor life, they called it, complete with shared meals, walks, and domestic relaxation. These articles portrayed them as inseparable buddies, yet modern observers see more. Vanity Fair describes how joint magazine features portrayed them doing household chores, whistling at the kitchen sink, and relaxing together in domestic settings. Such photos, once intended to sell a carefree bachelor lifestyle, now appear full of subtext. Grant biographer Bill Royce recounts a moment later in Grant's life when Grant himself allegedly told Royce that his relationship with Scott was transformative. He is said to have described his feelings in poetic terms. "Have you ever heard of gravity collapse? Some people call it love at first sight." He recalled that, though Scott may not have returned his depth of passion, they explored their attraction nonetheless. Royce's version suggests Grant told him that their connection was not strictly homosexual or strictly heterosexual, but somewhere in between, fluid, as modern commentators now say. The nature of their cohabitation is key to understanding these rumors. In the mid-1930s, Grant and Scott reportedly lived together off and on for about a decade. They co-owned property, shared a beach house, and appeared repeatedly in magazine spreads, sunbathing, walking by the water, even reading side by side. These images, at the time, were published under the guise of glamorous bachelorhood. But in retrospect, they look like the domestic portrait of a deeply bonded partnership rather than mere roommates. Critics argue that studios sometimes orchestrated such portrayals to appear natural yet constrained. Publicists might have allowed select photos, but suppressed more revealing ones.
Judy Garland, born Frances Ethel Gumm on June 10, 1922, appeared destined for stardom. From her earliest days on stage with her sisters to her iconic turn as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, 1939, she enchanted the world with her voice, vulnerability, and emotional intensity. But behind the radiance was a life marked by coercive studio control, chronic insecurity, addiction, and battles the public never fully understood. When Garland signed with MGM at age 13 in 1935, she entered a system that would demand more than just her talent. It would demand her body, her energy, and her obedience. Biography accounts reveal that as a teenager, she was placed on strict diets, closely monitored by studio doctors who advised amphetamine pep pills to keep her going and barbiturates to sleep. The studio even limited her diet to things like chicken soup and black coffee when filming The Wizard of Oz. These interventions, intended to maintain her youthful image, sowed lifelong dependence and trauma. According to history, Garland's mother, Ethel, was the first to give her stimulants and sedatives even before her contract with MGM. Over time, MGM's doctors formalized the practice as part of her daily work regimen. Garland later recalled, "They'd give Mickey Rooney and me pills to keep us on our feet long after we were exhausted. Then they'd knock us out with sleeping pills. After 4 hours, they'd wake us up and give the pep pills again, so we could work 72 hours in a row." These early abuses left scars. Garland's weight, appearance, and health were under constant surveillance. Studio head Louis B. Mayer is reported to have disparaged her appearance, even calling her "my little hunchback" and pressuring her to stay unnaturally thin. By her peak years, Garland was delivering beloved performances in Meet Me in St. Louis, 1944, and A Star is Born, 1954. But as her fame grew, so did her private struggles. In the mid-1940s and 50s, she endured emotional instability, depression, financial stress, and the lingering effects of studio-enforced addiction. Her third husband and longtime collaborator, Sid Luft, later described how Garland's reliance on prescription medication deteriorated. He claimed that studio pressures jammed pills down her throat, and that the systems of production, public image, and profit all converged in her body. Luft also recounted that during A Star is Born, Garland was emotionally volatile, underweight, and pressured by the studio to perform under extreme conditions. He criticized MGM's refusal to allow her more control over her life, including her medications and creative choices. As Garland aged, her attempts at comebacks were repeatedly undermined by her fragile health and addictions. On Summerstock, 1950, wardrobe teams checked that wardrobe teams struggled to keep her appearing slim, and she was reportedly late or erratic in her behavior, pressure reportedly exacerbated by her emotional fragility and dependence on pills.
Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was born in Hobart, Tasmania, on June 20, 1909, a young man with restless energy and a wild longing for adventure. He blossomed into one of Hollywood's most iconic swashbucklers, a hero in vivid color and lush costumes. Films like Captain Blood, 1935, The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, The Seahawk, 1940, and The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, 1939, defined his public image. Daring, charming, fearless. His swordplay, romantic dalliances on screen, and that rakish smile made Flynn the ideal masculine fantasy for millions. He was the kind of actor who could swing on chandeliers, duel by moonlight, or rescue a damsel, all while looking impeccable. Audiences, studios, and critics alike praised Flynn's ability to embody adventure and raw, unshakable confidence. Britannica lists him among the top adventure stars of his era, citing his roles in The Seahawk, Robin Hood, Dodge City, Santa Fe Trail, and They Died with Their Boots On as evidence of his meteoric rise. Britannica. But away from the green screens, backdrops, and lines of adoring fans, Errol Flynn lived a life far more tangled than any pirate script. His off-screen reputation was built around excess, women, drink, legal trouble. Flynn's lifestyle was unrestrained, reckless, often dangerous, and the studios worked hard to manage his image, but the consequences were inevitable. One of the most shocking episodes in Flynn's life came in late 1942, when two teenage girls, Peggy Satterley and Betty Hansen, brought statutory rape charges against him. One claim alleged improper relations aboard his yacht, another at a friend's Bel Air estate. Flynn denied everything. After a high-profile trial in 1943, the jury acquitted him on all counts. The case widened cracks in his public persona and sowed lasting controversy. EBS Go Research. EBS Go Research. Although legally cleared, the trial left another mark, one that no courtroom could erase. Flynn's womanizing became even more sensationalized. Rumors circulated, biographies added whispered details, and press coverage became less respectful of his heroism. His reputation had always leaned flirtatious and bold, but now the contrast between hero roles and rumored private misdeeds was undeniable. Rumors of affairs with women from all corners of Hollywood followed him. Lily Demita was his first wife, 1935 to 1942, a glamorous French actress. He later married actress Nora Eddington and then Patrice Wymore, with whom he had a daughter. But even in marriage, Flynn seemed drawn toward relationships that flirted with scandal. One of the most talked about was his involvement with Beverly Adland, a teenager when Flynn was much older. The relationship, often depicted as exploitative, emerged in biographies and interviews, acquiring controversially sharp edges in accounts like The Big Love, written by Beverly's mother, Florence Adland. Wikipedia. Potentially unsourced material may be challenged and removed, as according to The Big Love, Adland and Flynn had an affair when he was only 14. Wikipedia. The Big Love.
A son, John, born in 1924, who was deaf, and a daughter, Susie, in 1932. Despite his steady career through the 1930s and 1940s, marked by Academy Award wins and nominations, his personal life began to shift when he met Katharine Hepburn on the set of Woman of the Year in 1942. Hepburn, already divorced, was young, outspoken, fiercely independent. Tracy was married, devoutly Catholic, bound by public morality clauses, and constrained by the studios. Their on-screen chemistry was electric, but off-screen, the relationship grew in secrecy, tension, and longing. For over 25 years, their relationship was an open secret. Spencer and Katharine starred together in 9 films: Woman of the Year, 1942, Adam and Rib, 1949, Pat and Mike, 1952, State of the Union, 1948, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, 1967, among others. These films allowed glimpses of something deeper, the way their eyes softened, how their timing and dialogue suggested unsaid devotion. But Hollywood studios of that era would never have permitted a divorce for a star like Tracy. It would damage both his public image and box office draw. Because of his Catholic faith and the legal and social norms of the time, divorce was unthinkable. Yet Tracy never lived full-time in the family home after he began his affair with Hepburn. He often stayed in rented apartments or hotels when filming, visiting his children and wife on weekends. Katharine Hepburn later described their bond in her autobiography Me, Stories of My Life, published in 1991. "I loved him," she wrote, "of how even early on she was drawn to Tracy in a way she could not fully explain.
Tracy, never comfortable discussing such things publicly, maintained boundaries shaped by beliefs, contracts, studios, and personal guilt. Their love was deep yet hidden, affection expressed quietly through caring letters, private moments, and shared creative passion. While Tracy's marriage to Louise Treadwell formally remained intact until his death in 1967, emotionally he was increasingly distant from her. Reports by friends and biographers suggest his heart belonged to Hepburn. Hepburn, for her part, often subordinated her public persona in service of protecting Tracy's reputation. She did not attend his funeral, out of respect for his wife. She watched from a mortuary what she called the final goodbye.